Hey guys, with another One Take review. Today I want to talk about the new Big Thief album, Dragon New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You. And this is the first album that we've gotten from the band in a few years. And it's also the longest album title that we've got from the band so far. And I mean, beyond the obnoxiously lengthy title that I'm going to not be saying in full for the rest of this video, this is actually some of the band's best material so far. And that's really saying something considering they already do have a pretty strong discography overall, albeit small. I mean, the band themselves sound fantastic here, as you would probably expect if you're even slightly familiar with their previous work. Adrienne Lenker's vocal work here is just absolutely gorgeous. Her solo album, I think it was 2 years ago now, was pretty good. I wasn't the biggest fan, but I mean, her vocals were still on point. All of her solo work, I should say. And since the beginning of her career, she's never been a letdown in terms of a vocalist, and this latest Big Thief record is no exception. Of course, besides Linker, the rest of the band just sound lovely as well. The rest of the band, of course, consists of guitarist Buck Meek, bassist Max Olirchik, as well as drummer James Krivshinia. I am very sorry if I pronounced either of those wrong. I've been trying to figure out how to pronounce them correctly, and I'm still not 100% sure. But allow me to move on before I get too awkward. They sound great here on songs like Simulation Swarm, which is a definite highlight of the album. They are just fantastic performers, and of course, Big Thief aren't a kind of band to really be focused too much on the complexity of instrumentals, and rather they would kind of focus on the atmosphere and overall build-up of songs. But nonetheless, they do sound really strong and just tight as a band here overall. Lyricism has always been a very major factor of Big Thief's music, and especially, like I said before, Adrian Lenker's music. But the lyricism here is great. I mean, previous records have been fantastic, of course, and featured some of the best songwriting of their own respective years of release. But Dragon New Warm Mountain is just really a masterclass in songwriting, ranging from the just devastatingly personal to very poetically universal sort of themes and concepts. And overall, this is probably some of the best songwriting that Big Thief has delivered so far, and probably at least going to end up being among the best songwriting by the end of the year. I mean, of course, we do have upcoming albums by the likes of Father John Misty and whatnot that will also, be fighting for that title, I have no doubt. But Big Thief are at least going to end up in that top five. I have no doubt in my mind about that. The songwriting on here is just absolutely fantastic overall, and it never once dips in quality, even with the length of this record. While I do think that Big Thief as a band have always been very folk and country based at heart, I will say that this record is probably them leaning into their influences a lot harder than we normally see, and I personally like it. I mean, you've got a lot of songs here actually that sort of blend together that style of classic folk and classic country, especially the latter. There are some songs here that are just straight up modern alternative country, which again I really like that. I think it's a great thing to see, and I think that if one of them, or I should say, if one of their upcoming albums ever ended up just being a straight up country album, I would be perfectly fine with that because in the most stripped down moments of this record where they really start to lean into those influences, it just sounds fantastic, and it sounds as great as anything that they have done before that was more layered, or even other work on the album that was much more layered overall. That isn't to say this is, an exclusively folk or exclusively country record. This isn't entirely just, stripped down acoustic numbers, of course. There's a lot of songs here, again, that kind of combine those folk and those country influences with modern indie rock and indie pop, like the Big Thief has always done. And again, it sounds great. They've already kind of proven that they know how to do that formula very well, but they continuously keep evolving and managing to pack more emotion into their music, and I do think that's evident on their latest album. And I think that if they continue down the road that they're going to continue, that they go on, are going on this album, I think that overall I'd be fine with that. A lot of bands can come across as repetitive if they kind of stick to the same style, but Big Thief seem to be able to stick to the same style, but progressively do it better as time goes on. So if they can just keep improving, I'm perfectly fine with that. Those folk and country kind of based songs are really perfectly complemented by that sort of warm melancholy that's kind of spread throughout this album. I mean, this record could just probably be best described as almost bittersweet in a way. I would say a solid three-quarters of this album is like the kind of music that you would hear at like the end of a movie as like a car drives along like a coastal area and the sun setting or something like that. And I know that's a very, very specific example, but listen to the album and I think you'll get what I mean. I would say that's kind of because of the very dense sound of the album, but it's not like it's overbearing or anything like that. Not long ago, and by not long ago, I mean a few days ago, as I upload this, I did a review for the recent Animal Collective album, Time Skiffs, and one of my complaints with that was that the record was just too dense and it kind of became a wall of sound that just blended into itself after a while and took some of the longer songs and sort of made them pointless after the first minute or two. And this is the complete opposite. This is not sort of this overwhelming wall of sound, but more just something that kind of is almost a tsunami of just emotional power. And that's something that I think is difficult to accomplish, really, because it's so easy to make something just so overbearing to the point that it kind of becomes either cheesy or it becomes forced or whatever. You get my point. And I think that Big Thief really did a fantastic job taking something that can easily be messed up and perfecting it with just the right balance of rawness and actual sort of production behind it. One of the most noteworthy non-musical pieces of the most recent Big Thief album is the fact that this record really doesn't have a lot of direction or any sort of overarching themes. And I do think that overall it's sort of a blessing and a curse for the album. I mean, on one hand, this kind of lets Big Thief really make sure that each individual song is very distinct, has a prominent kind of style to it, and you can kind of tell each song apart. You don't need to listen to the entire hour and a half almost long album to be able to appreciate specific songs. But on the other hand, that's kind of the same problem that I do have. I kind of feel like this almost comes across as more of a very long collection of songs by a very great band than an actual cohesive album, which it's obviously supposed to be doing. I mean, the band themselves even talked about the fact that this is supposed to be sort of a concept album, I guess, well, about traveling, I believe it was. So I don't really see it myself. I mean, every song is connected in terms of actual music, but there's no sort of actual progression throughout the album. There are just some songs that have the sort of same tone at the beginning of the album and by the end of the album, and it sort of just doesn't really go in any specific direction. Every song is related to the point that they aren't related anymore, and I know that's an oxymoron, but it really that's the best way I can describe it. It just sort of it doesn't go anywhere, and thankfully the album is a consistently great record, so it doesn't really like affect the album too much in terms of quality. But even still, I kind of would have maybe liked to have seen some more soaring heights by the end of things, or maybe a slower start to things, or maybe a fast start to things going down to a slower ending. Something that will make some sort of progress in this album and make the beginning feel different to the end, which they really don't. And finally, I wanted to address the sort of elephant in the room about this album, which is, yeah, this album is almost an hour and a half long. Yes, I do think that is way longer than warranted. This is a great album, don't get me wrong. Big Thief are a great band. This album could have been easily cut off at like the 50-minute mark, hour mark, maybe, and that's pushing it. I just think that there becomes a point where it's sort of such an, I don't want to say intimidating, because intimidating is a strong word, but sort of just it makes you not want to listen to it in full for a second time unless you're doing something like reviewing it. So, just overall, I think this album could have been cut down a bit. Again, it's consistently great. It's not like it takes a nosedive in quality like some other long albums do that I can think of, but I do kind of feel like it becomes kind of tiring to listen to it after a while. When I listened to this, I did listen to it in a full once, and then I also ended up listening to like half of it, and then another quarter of it, and then I took a break again, and then it was like another quarter of it. I split it up, and I think that if I ever listen to this album in full again, that is exactly what I'm going to do. I do think this is just the kind of record that you should just cherry pick individual songs of, but at the same time, I do feel like everyone should listen to this in full at least once, just because, well, that's the way the band intended it to be listened to, and I think that we should respect that at least to some extent. But nonetheless, I do think that this album should have been cut down at least slightly. So overall, Dragon New War Mountain, I Believe in You, Big Thief's latest album. It's great. It does suffer from a overly long, unwarranted runtime, and it doesn't really have any sort of direction. It doesn't really know what it wants to. It knows what it wants to be, but doesn't know what it wants to become, and then as such, it doesn't really become anything. But at the same time, the songwriting is amazing as usual. The performances are great. The vocal work is fantastic, and it would be really hard to fault this album and give it a poor rating just because of the fact that it's a little too long. I love other albums that are just a little too long. So I mean, you know what? This album is it's a 4 out of 5 for me. It's a great record. I do recommend it, whether you've heard Big Thief's previous stuff or not. If you don't want to listen to the full album, which I completely understand, it can be kind of difficult to find the time to listen to an entire almost hour and a half long album. I think it's like an hour and 21 minutes. There, I would just say, kind of just pick a small handful of songs. Maybe listen to the last 5 songs or the first 5 songs in the album. I personally would really recommend the last 5. I feel like that's the kind of golden streak that the album has. The final 5 tracks on the album. But anyways, yeah. With that being said, 4 stars out of 5. Great record. I would definitely recommend it. And with that being said, that is the end of this review. So I will see you guys in the next one.